This is Shirley Love, announcer and accounts executive for WOAY TV4. He is touted here and far as a pillar of the Oak Hill community, both for his outgoing personality and his community service. As an executive, he talks with his clients, not at them. This is the Shirley Love of today. But what about the Shirley Love of yesterday?
Here is Shirley Love. Disaster struck in the small mining town of Malcolm, West Virginia.
Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to American International Championship Wrestling. Today
Shirley began his 37-year broadcasting career not in television, but in radio.
But actually, I started in television after I started in radio.
Really?
R. Thomas Sr., who owned both the radio and television station. I worked for WOAY Radio as a DJ and did football and basketball games. And then they built the television station, and I graduated over to work. Actually, I was a combination man. I worked radio and television for years and years. I would do a split shift. I'd work certain TV shows and for certain radio programs. For instance, the popular radio show, anybody from 50 years up will remember Jukebox Review, which was from 3 to 5 p.m. I did that show for about 63, probably 20 years. And it was a real popular program. It was a request show. The various high school kids would write in, play their favorite song for their favorite girlfriend or boyfriend with a little comment here in between. And then we played the top 21 songs of the week according to Billboard and requested songs on Friday. Then I did a lot of football and basketball games. In fact, I did all the Oak Hill High School football basketball games from 54 or 55 on until we're still doing them from time to time. But then it came the TV station, and that's when I got into TV work.
In 1950, when television was in its fledgling stages, there really wasn't a wide selection of programming available to the masses.
The station came on the air, and actually the first network that Channel 4 had was called the Dumont Television Network. You probably never heard of it. And then that was actually the Dumont Television Network is now the ABC network. ABC bought out DuPont. In its infancy, Channel 4 had two networks. They had CBS and ABC, or CBS and Dumont, and then CBS and ABC after they bought them out. But we signed on the air, didn't sign on the air until 4 o'clock in the evening. The test pattern came on at 9 o'clock in the morning, and if you had a television set back then, you just sit and watch the test pattern, because television was, like going to the moon. It was phenomenal, just to be able to have a set. And most people didn't, so what you did, the fortunate ones that had a TV set, everybody went over to their house to watch their favorite program.
When it came to programming, Shirley and company at Channel 4 had to be very creative.
Made television so popular back then, everything was live programs as far as on a local basis. For instance, at Channel 4, we had talent search where people would come out and they'd watch, exercises, country music, singing, blowing a horn, or whatever. You had kid shows, you had musical shows, you had live wrestling, you had just about everything. Really, you had even a chapel hour. The local churches produced.
One of the big shows that came out of this creative stage was Saturday Night Wrestling. This show, hosted by Shirley, lasted almost 2.5 decades. That's very good for an unsyndicated wrestling program.
Wrestling. That was the big one. That's the one that everybody enjoyed. That was everyone's Saturday night opera. And it gave audience participation. At Channel 4, in the early years of it, it was before a tape machine came along. It was all live. Everything was live, and this was held in the studios. And we would give away the tickets. You could write in wherever you lived in the Tri-County area, and you get up to 6 free tickets. It was on a first-come, first-served basis. Family would come over. They could watch the wrestling matches for free in the studios. And it got to be a very, very popular show.
WOAY had to play an announcement before each Saturday night wrestling broadcast stating that the show was prearranged. Shirley says that it kept them from having to pay the West Virginia Athletic Panel's fee for broadcasting a sports program. But this didn't keep the fans from getting very in.
But now the audience was very much for real. There's no fake about the audience. And this made it a lot of fun because in the early years of the live wrestling, and I'm saying live, when you was talking to someone in the audience who had just got inflamed by one of the bad guys roughing up the eyes of one of the good guys, you never knew what they was going to say. You had to be quick on the trigger of disconnecting that microphone because they just came up with some pretty foul language at times. They'd forget where they were, and a lot of times it got on the air. I mean, it was funny, and it wasn't funny. It wasn't funny for an announcer. It was funny for the audience.
Shirley came onto the show as its color man after the first 2 weeks and stayed for its entire duration. One has to wonder, why?
Well, in this case, no one else wanted to do it. It was about 1954, and at that time, Bob Kent, who was manager of the Fayetteville Memorial Auditorium, they held wrestling matches in the auditorium, and Bob Kent, he did it a couple of weeks, and he said, "Look, man, I can't do this." So the boss said, "Shirley, you'll do Saturday Night Wrestling." Well, I was like you. I was almost an intern to some of the youngsters you have here at Votech. I'd do anything to even though I didn't know I couldn't do it. So I developed my own style. I didn't know arm lock from a flying mare to a flying Bill or a Boston crab or whatever all those holes were, but made them up as I went along, and it worked pretty good. In fact, you have some of the footage in the early years of wrestling, and we had everyone there from Argentine Rocca to Gorgeous George.
Shirley wasn't just limited to wrestling, though. He also hosted a show called the Friday Night Barn Dance.
Yeah, that was another form of entertainment in the early years of television from Channel 4 that, again, gave folks an opportunity a place to go, to exercise their talents. This was country and western music, and each Friday night we did this in the studio. And also on Saturday afternoon we called the Country Jamboree. It was a 2-hour program that you could, if you had a band, you could come in for free and your band would play 15 minutes and you could do your thing, rockabilly or whatever. But some of the groups that a lot of the fans will remember, like Rex and Eleanor Parker and Red Leidig, Bill O'Dell, Everett Lilly and the Lilly Brothers, Elmer Hickman, he was the Blue Mountain Yodeler, and he was one of our early announcers. This type of entertainment, it was just, people entertaining people from their area. And this is one little thing we used to do on this, I'll tell you, on the country and western shows. As an announcer, on Saturday afternoon, 2 hours is a long time to play around on the air with different groups, so we'd dream up little things to do. And a lot of people thought I could play a lot of instruments. For instance, you was a banjo picker. Okay, you always, back then, you took a break. You'd sing, and then you'd take a break. The camera would go over on the guitar picker or the violinist or whatever. So there was always extra instruments around. So a lot of times, I'd get the cameraman to come over on me and, for instance, a fiddle break. Well, someone else that could really play the fiddle, he'd be playing, and I'd be going through this, all this stuff. Then later, someone would say, "Hey, love, play us a tune on the fiddle." I said, "Man, I can't play the fiddle." "Yeah, you can play the fiddle. We saw you play the fiddle." But I really couldn't. The guitar, banjo, the same way. It was always fun to give one of those Jerry Lee Lewis breaks on the piano, and I wouldn't even be hitting the note. But
the barn dance was coupled with another music show, the West Virginia Bandstand.
But West Virginia Bandstand, now that was a good one. This is where the area high schools each evening would come over to the studios, and usually it was Oak Hill High School because they were the closest. And for 30 minutes we'd dance in the studio to all the popular tunes of that time. This was around 58, 59, 60, 61. And a couple of the kids would lead off a dance, would interview them, and it kept everybody up with what was the top tunes.
It was kind of like the American Bandstand.
It was the local American Bandstand. An interesting note: the Oak Hill Civitan last year had the West Virginia Bandstand reunion, and they're going to have it again this year on August the 24th at the Memorial Auditorium. And if you was one of those particular ones back in that era, it'd be interesting to come over and what it is, the same couples around the area that danced to those tunes in 58, 59, 60, and 61. They come back over to the Memorial Building, and we sort of redo the same format. Last year it was a lot of fun, and I'm sure it's going to be even more fun and more people participating this year than last year.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Oak Hill Civitan, West Virginia Bandstand Reunion. Well, back in the late 50s and early 60s, one of the highlights of a teenager's day was an evening of dancing in the studios of WOAY-TV to the West Virginia Bandstand. Well, today, we're going to venture back into the late 50s and early 60s and
From the bandstand, Shirley went on to news. He did some anchoring for WOAY during the late 60s and early 70s. It was during this time that Shirley got a story that he considers his gem.
This is 1967. Yeah, this was sort of, every newsman that does news, you like to have an exclusive. This sort of was my exclusive then. And Channel 4 at that time, we didn't have 16 millimeter. We did all of our news with Polaroid. And this particular Saturday, and this accident, Siltex mine explosion, happened on a Saturday. And the footage that you're going to see, my wife took my 8mm camera later that night when it was played back on television and videoed it, and took the sound recorder and recorded the sound on a reel-to-reel. Well, I didn't find this until about 3 or 4 years ago, 1987, I think. I found it in a drawer. I forgot about it. And then this is real, good footage. A lot of people have never seen it before.
WOAY, Oak Hill, Beckley. The Channel 4 news special report on the coal mine explosion at Mount Hope, West Virginia. Reporting is Shirley Love and Sandy Higgins. Here is Shirley Love. Disaster struck in the small mining town of Mount Hope, West Virginia at 9 o'clock this morning. A gas explosion rocked the Siltex mine of the New River Company, killing 7 men and injuring 6 others. The men had just changed shifts when the tragedy occurred. Rescuers encountered a great deal of difficulty trying to reach the trapped men, and it was not until 6:30 this evening that the last 6 bodies were brought to the surface. In the process, 2 of the rescued were injured. Several others were overcome by the bad air in the mine. The mine, which had been inactive since 1939 until 8 years ago, is listed as a very gassy mine by the West Virginia Department of Mines. Local